interview. I'd like
That's
to
good.
welcome to the Human Together Music Festival, Rafino Murphy, who plays under the name Uli. He is out of Dublin, Ireland. Welcome to the festival, first of all.
Thank you very much, Dave. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
How would you describe your music and your sound?
Always very tough. A tough question, a dreaded question even. The best way for me to describe it, well, it kind of has two different forms. So in a live setting, it's very, very different to the recording. So I'll talk about the recording first. How I describe the records, it's like a friend of mine actually coined this. He describes it as he describes it as music from a version of the 70s that never happened. So it's for me the best way and the way that makes the most sense for me to describe it is by referencing other acts and other artists. So if you took a lot of old dusty like Northern Soul records and a lot of Motown stuff, and you stuck them in a blender with maybe kind of more, let's say, more modern acts. Let's take Unknown Mortal Orchestra, for example, who I take after when it comes to like vocal production. I've been kind of compared to him before. Really, really good band from New Zealand. I think they're Kiwis. But if you took kind of more modern, kind of like psych and soul revival bands, and then you kind of put them in a blender with all kind of like Motown and soul acts, and then put some pop tendencies in there, then you wouldn't be too far off, I suppose.
I saw the description and I love that. A version of the 70s that never happened. I was like, that's dead on. I don't know how you came up with that, but I was like, that is exactly on. So are some of your musical influences from the 70s, or who are some of your bands or artists that influence your music?
Ooh, another tough one. So I would be very much of the opinion that whatever the sensory input is, whatever you're putting in your ears is going to come out in one shape or form, you know. And not even just your ears, like whatever books you're reading, whatever films you're watching, whatever you see outside, whatever people say to you, you know, that's in one way, shape or form going to go in, get processed, get jumbled up, and then come out in whatever your medium is, be it music or be it spoken word, be it like art, whatever form whatever art form that you go after. But for me, some heavy influences would be a lot of older stuff. My house wasn't so much like a muso house or anything like that. Like nobody was really obsessed with music or like an avid listener at home, but the kind of records that my dad, for example, would have been listening to, he would have been listening to like a lot of 60s, a lot of Motown. Like one staple in our house growing up that I remember is the Good Morning Vietnam soundtrack. You know, he would have that on in the car all the time. All the time. And I suppose it just kind of like, I just absorbed it as a kid. I wasn't really aware of how much of an impact that was having, or how much that kind of like shaped my taste. Because when I was growing up, when I was a teenager, that kind of like that changed. My taste changed. I wasn't listening to that for ages, and it wasn't until I was much older that I kind of revisited listening to that sort of music, or I put that soundtrack on just for whatever reason when I was away, and it's started to all come back, and I just kind of like dived heavily into soul and Motown music for a long time. And at the same time, I was listening to kind of like a lot of instrumental kind of like beat type music, a lot of kind of like that lo-fi hip hop stuff that's doing the rounds. I was listening to a lot of that, and so I suppose that kind of also helped shape whatever kind of sonic textures that I have. It's like you take all that Motown stuff and with all those pop tendencies, and then you put it together with all this dusty and kind of lo-fi and unclear production, I suppose, and then I kind of pop out. But it's not strictly the music is heavily influenced by stuff like that, but there's nods to jazz, there's nods to straight up pop music, there's nods to psychedelia, especially in like the early stuff, and there's nods to some kind of like singer-songwriter more kind of even like more recently with the stuff that I've been writing, there's kind of like nods to like folk as well, you know, especially in kind of like the stripped back, kind of like simpler songs that I've been writing. Like one of the ones that came in during the winter, That's No Way. That one in particular, and the sounds of the chords that I use and the kind of like melodies I have, I for me, one thing that kind of sticks out for me is like there's a lot of like Jeff Buckley's Grace, that record in there. You know, some of the kind of like phrasing and some of the kind of chords that he'd use, that he would have used on that record, kind of like found their way into that song, you know. But yeah, so it kind of depends. But the heavy influences, as I mentioned previously, are there. Yeah.
Sounds like you have your dad to thank. You were kind of an inadvertent sponge on some of that. You probably didn't realize it.
Yeah, exactly.
Your music is in a digital format, and I would kind of relate to the 70s. Did you purposely, it sounds like a record. You had some scratchy parts to it, which is really good. That seemed very intentional to me.
It was a conscious decision, yeah. And I suppose like for a long time, I've been involved with many projects since I started playing music when I was like 12 or 13. I got involved with some kind of like punk bands and some pop bands and all sorts of stuff, you know. So I've dabbled in a lot of stuff with other people, but I've never really taken on my own project, as it were. Like I've made demos and all that sort of stuff, but I never really settled on a sound and or nothing ever felt it's like anything that I had made up to a certain point just didn't feel quite ready, or didn't feel like I was right to put out or to share, you know. And it wasn't until like much later, it was maybe a year and a half ago, 2 years ago now, when I put out the first track. I just kind of stumbled across that sound, you know, like the kind of like dusty aspect, the little vinyl crackles and stuff like that. That's kind of like a nod to older records, and kind of a nod to like that lo-fi hip hop thing that I was telling you about. And it just, everything seemed to suit and to contribute to this overall feeling of old in what would be new, you know. It's like the new old sort of thing, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. You kind of, it sounds like you really fell into your groove, especially with songs like you recently released, Cold Water, which to me is a beautiful song, relaxing melody. What can you tell me about that song? What was the reasoning behind that?
It's a funny one. Towards the end of last year, I ended up having I got a really bad dose of writer's block during the summer and stuff like that. Normally, because I'm working full time, not solely just chasing music, or pursuing music as a career. I work maybe 40 odd hours a week anyway. In a music retail establishment here in Dublin, one of the oldest ones in the country, which is pretty cool. But as I say, like that means I don't have that much time to write, and creativity and that kind of like feeling of flow, or like being productive with something creative, like making music or whatever. It's not necessarily something that you can just turn on. A lot of things have to line up, you know. It kind of has, you kind of just have to be feeling it, you know. And because the amount of time that I can work with is limited, I just have to make sure that I that I use whatever time, whenever I kind of get this feeling of, okay, cool, this is working, whatever. I really need to maximize that time, because it's so limited. So what I tend to do is I don't hoard music or anything that I'm working on. I tend to just kind of go, okay, right, out you go, as it's done. So that's why there hasn't been like a solid body of work or anything like that. It's just been kind of singles. So towards the end of last year, I ended up just getting in a bit of a rut, and it wasn't, for a long time, I wasn't really, the summer circuit, with the summer festival circuit was quite taxing, and even though it wasn't too heavy, it wasn't like any rigorous tour or anything like that, but you couple that with working and stuff like that, it was just, I had nothing left in the tank. Autumn rolls around, winter rolls around, there wasn't really anything there that I was happy with, so I kind of took a bit of a break. And what I did was I just took some time off music. There was a couple of shows and stuff like that, but in terms of writing, I said I just wanted to leave it alone for a while, you know. And I kind of was feeling kind of bad, not badder, but I don't know. I just fell into a bit of a hole. But when it came to writing music, a couple of friends of mine brought me out towards the end of the summer. They brought me out to Kerry in the west of Ireland. We took a couple of days. Just got a house, and the guys, they'd been taking surf trips for a good while. And Kerry, the west coast of Ireland, is renowned for its surf, especially during the kind of like the autumn, the winter months as well. With all the storms in the North Atlantic, it ends up pushing swell towards us before it kind of cleans up and goes towards Portugal and other spots in Europe. But I hadn't been since I was smaller. But I had been going for a lot of kind of like dips and a lot of swims just on Sundays, which would have been usually my riding day. But I had consciously been not riding on Sunday and going for swims down on the East Coast, just as a means of, I suppose, clearing the head, and you know, and that trip, I suppose, kind of helped. I didn't realize how much I needed that kind of time away. It was just, I think a lot of things seemed to line up right. I really enjoyed the surf trip with the guys before I knew it. There was another group of friends who were going out the next weekend, and I jumped on it. And before I knew it, I was kind of hooked. It didn't take too long before I ended up getting my own wetsuit, my own gear, all this sort of stuff. And I just kind of got whole ass invested in surfing for a good while. And it just, it was the thing outside of music that I didn't know that I needed, you know, just something to bring me away from it, you know, that wasn't necessarily creative in the strict sense. And there is elements of creativity to surfing, but not when you're not when you're just beginning or anything like that.
So that leads to my next question. You mentioned hanging out with friends and all that. Do you record and perform primarily as a solo artist, or are you bringing other people into the fold? Do you have other musicians that you perform or record with?
Yeah, so generally all the recordings, everything that I've released so far, all the recordings so far have just been myself in my bedroom at home, bar like one of the live tracks, which was recorded in with a couple of friends of mine in Avenue Road Studios in Dublin. When I'm playing live, I bring a couple of friends along with me. We're there's six of us in total, myself included. So 2 brass, regular 5, with myself kind of like playing guitar and singing at the same time. And it kind of takes on a totally different vibe. It kind of is, it's a little bit of a straight up soul band in that sense, you know, that it's got that kind of outfit.
Horns and those types of things.
Yeah, exactly. And everything is much clearer. The vocals are much clearer. You can kind of hear what I'm saying, and the arrangements are different as well. But it would kind of take after like a soul band, I suppose, as when in the live setting. So it's kind of cool that there's 2 sides. There's a little bit for everyone. Like soul might not be for everyone, but you know, like, but who may like the tracks may not be into the live thing, and vice versa. There might be people who like the live arrangements and aren't too keen on the actual recording. So it's cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
Totally switching gears. I want to ask you about this. You recently organized a fundraiser. Who was involved in that, and what organization benefited from that?
So the fundraiser itself had a more, as opposed to it being for like a non-profit or a charity in the strict sense of the word, my mother had told me that my aunt, who's a nurse over in Manila, herself and a couple of her other colleagues, they had fallen on hard times because of the private hospital that they were working for, essentially put them on call indefinitely. However, some of them were just kind of like let go completely, and some of them were put on call, and the hours were cut. Right now, for the most part, what a lot of countries have tried to do is they've tried to supplement income loss as a result of like closures or being let go or something like that, as a result of COVID-19. But that didn't apply to them in the Philippines. Policy failures and kind of like a loophole, I suppose, a flaw in the system, meant that technically, because they were still working for a private hospital, they weren't entitled to any benefits or any sort of supplementary income to make up the difference of what they have lost, you know. Now, the reason why they were let go in the first place, despite being kind of frontline workers, is that the hospital couldn't get its hands on enough personal protective equipment. You know, so they weren't taking on any new patients or anything like that, but they were not operating kind of at full capacity. They kind of just shrank their numbers, you know, and kind of had bare bones staff. So my aunt, along with another maybe like 15 to 20 nurses, ended up kind of just not having any income really, or very, very a fraction of what they had for a couple of weeks, and weren't able to get their rents pushed back, or weren't able to get their bills frozen or anything like that. So money out remained the same, but the money in was only a fraction of what it was. So I was talking to my mom, and we basically just had this idea. I was like, well, you know what we can do is maybe able to use the platform, the Yuli platform, or the music, albeit a small one. I was like, okay, well, why don't I just kind of put a little fundraiser together and see if we can get some cash for my aunt and other nurses who may not have family abroad to help support them. You know, like my family, everyone's been impacted by this, and like despite us trying to help her as much as we can, so it's our own income is taking a hit. It's not necessarily sustainable. So we're like, okay, let's try see if we can raise some cash for that. And for other nurses, you know, it roughly works out at about, I'd say about it'd be $50 for you, 40 quid for us. We'll buy about 50 kilograms of rice, do a family of 4 for a month. You know, even something like that is huge. You know, so the fundraiser was primarily between me and my mother. The money which is going to my aunt, who's going to distribute it to any of the nurses who've been affected by this, you know. And then whatever excess we had over the original target, seeing as we cleared it quite quickly, there is a rice mill in Albuera Leite, which is my mother's hometown, called Ekin Rice Mill, and they've essentially been turned into a volunteer group. What they're doing at the moment is bringing they're bringing medical supplies, vegetables, and rice to elderly folk, kind of in and around Albuera. Some of the poor families in older families in Albuera who wouldn't have a means of transport or can't get around. They're kind of in the mountains and stuff like that. And basically, what they do is, so they buy these medical supplies and rice and stuff like that, and then they depend on kind of donations or charitable donations to make up the money that they've put into it, you know. So they kind of like, it's kind of like a pay it forward sort of thing. So those are the main beneficiaries from the fundraiser.
It looked like you made a huge impact. You posted a video of people unloading rice, and they made a huge banner thanking you. So it definitely had
cool.
a good impact. That was really cool. So
yeah. They put
so I applaud you on those efforts. Once you are able to play live again, where could people go to see you play, or any plans to play in the United States?
Love to. It'd be amazing. I was actually in the States towards before everything, before over here we went into full lockdown, and before you guys went into lockdown as well. I was in San Diego, and I was trying to hook up a show, something kind of small, just like an acoustic guitar thing, with an old housemate of mine. Yeah, but it didn't happen. I would imagine that when gigs do start happening again, it'll probably be a case where I'll stay local. It would be nice to do like a tour around the country or something like that. I would absolutely love to go stateside for sure. But it's a matter of when, you know. I think my first port of call would be maybe the UK, a couple of the bigger cities in the UK, and maybe some bigger cities in the kind of like mainland or continental Europe before I go across the Atlantic. But that's, who knows, you know. If the opportunity arises, I'm not gonna turn away from it, you know, because
if you do come to the United States, we'd love you to play. I'm in Oklahoma. I'd love for you to swing through. We're right in the central in the United States. I think
that'd be awesome.
Get here, so.
Yeah, that'd be deadly. Thank you. Yeah, I'd love that. Yeah, but the tricky thing with the States is you kind of, because it's so vast and the population is so large, and they're states that are the size of countries that are bigger than Ireland as a whole, you know. And you kind of, before it makes sense to go to the States, you kind of have to have somewhat of a footing anyway, or someone to at least have kind of done a little bit of groundwork for you. And it's just quite hard doing that as independent. It's sort of different now. There are certainly bands who are making bands from Ireland who are making a bit of headway in the States and stuff like that in different circles, you know, kind of like the sort of post-punk revival sort of circuit, like something a bit grittier seems to be doing well. Like there's bands like the Murder Capital or the Fontaines, or, you know, that's just two kind of like off the top of the head who are in that circuit who had been doing quite well, you know. But it's a different world, and they just had like a large backing behind them, you know. They were able to kind of grind it out, go on kind of these what we call toilet tours, who are just like very, very cheap, but they're rigorous and they're grueling. They're on tour for a good portion of the year. They have a small respite from that, and then they go back at it, you know. And that's sort of what it's like, an old school way of doing it, you know. So that's the kind of, yeah, that's the kind of game plan that you need. And I just don't know if it's quite feasible for me to do yet, but
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yes.
That might change. Yeah.
Lastly, I discovered your music through Spotify. Where can listeners go to discover your music or find out more or buy your merch? Where can we go find out more about your music?
Thanks, Jason. So Spotify would be like the main platform that I'm on, but just those and kind of like the regular socials. I'd say the one that I'd be active on the most would be kind of Instagram. But in terms of merch and any other bits and bobs that I have on the go, I think Bandcamp would probably be the best bet. Yeah. And yeah, exactly. If you just look up,
or what do people type in to find you?
yeah. So to find me on Bandcamp, it's yulimjm at bandcamp.com. But if there's also, I put together my own website and stuff like that too, and that's just Yuli Music, ULYmusic.com, and then everything should be there. Yeah.
Great. Well, I'm really looking forward to your performance for the Human Together Virtual Music Festival, and I appreciate you taking the time to talk with me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jason. Honestly, thank you.